Hello, hello, welcome back to Talking Tunes, and today we're talking about the 6 tunes on Yes's 1980 album, Drama. Now, before we get into the review, we need to get into the background and some of the production history of this album. Yes is one of those bands that is kind of known for having a million different lineups over the years, and for the most part, there's only been 3 consistent figures. Steve Howe, Jon Anderson, and Chris Squire. Chris Squire died about 10 years ago, I want to say. May he rest in peace. Basically, most Yes albums have at least one of those 3 figures on it. At the time, or right before this album was to be made or to come out, Yes consisted of Jon Anderson on vocals, Steve Howe on guitar, Chris Squire on bass, Rick Wakeman on keys, and Alan White on drums. And this had been the lineup starting from Fragile in 1972, or not 1972, 1971, and, ending for a brief period with Topographic Oceans in 1973. Obviously, Bill Bruford was the drummer before Alan White, right? And then between Tales from Topographic Oceans and Relayer coming out, Rick Wakeman left. And then this fella Patrick Moraz came in and did the keyboards on Relayer. But then Rick Wakeman got pretty successful and Relayer was pretty successful. And so both Yes and Rick Wakeman looked at each other and went, yeah, we'll join forces. And so Patrick Moraz was let go. He did some fine work on Relayer. But Rick Wakeman rejoined the band, and they would produce 2 more albums, those being Going for the One in 1977 and Tornado in 1978. And the climate during the making and tour of Tornado was tense, lots and lots of arguing going on, but the band stayed together, and they went to Paris in 79. Of course, Steve Howe, Jon Anderson, Rick Wakeman, Chris Squire, Alan White, all were recording music in Paris as Yes in 1979. But the fighting continued, and basically, not only did Rick Wakeman go, fuck this is why I left back in 73 to begin with, but Jon Anderson was like, I'm sick of the arguing, fuck this, I'm leaving too. So that just leaves Steve Howe, Chris Squire, and Alan White, a trio. Now, there's quite a bit of musical talent in just that trio. However, you can't exactly tour as Yes without a keyboard player. Now, do I think they could have toured as Yes without a dedicated lead singer? Absolutely. Steve Howe and Chris Squire both have good voices on them. They harmonize with Jon Anderson all the time. I think if they had brought in a keyboard player and just a keyboard player, that they could have made a pretty good album and just toured like that. But that's not how they were used to performing. So that's understandable. But the problem, now, there was a bigger problem with Jon Anderson and Rick Wakeman leaving. The band had already booked a United States tour. A big one. I think it was something like 40 dates. Or something. Just, it was a lot. And so, basically, they were, basically, Howe, Squire, and White were like, well, shit, what are we going to do? Because people had already bought some tickets. And so, at the time, there was this new wave pop group by the name of the Buggles. And if that name sounds slightly familiar to you, that's because they are the guys who wrote Video Killed the Radio Star, which was the first video played on MTV. But that's not necessarily important. What is important is that the Buggles and Yes were both on Atlantic at the time. And so, and they were recording in roughly the same place at the time. And they had bumped into each other a couple of times. And Trevor Horn, who was the lead singer of the Buggles, was a big Yes fan, as was Jeff Downs, who was the keyboardist for the Buggles. And so, basically, Steve Howe went up to them and was like, "Would you like to join Yes?" And obviously, the Buggles looked at each other and went, "Fuck yeah." And so, here we are. The resultant album and tour would be Yes and the Buggles, but just under the name of Yes. And of course, they didn't perform any Buggles material because if you're going to a Yes show, you don't want to hear Video Killed the Radio Star. But yeah, that sets us up for the album. And the album starts off with the 10.5-minute epic Machine Messiah, which starts off with a borderline metal intro. Just like the guitar fades up and it's like very distorted. I don't know how to describe it. It's just like it's really fucking good. It's a borderline metal intro followed by some standard-ish Yes musicianship. Obviously, the keys are not as prominent or as extravagant because you got Jeff Downs as opposed to Rick Wakeman, and Jeff Downs is much more of a new wave player as opposed to a prog player, although later on he does pretty decent in the album, but he's very understated in this first one. And then when the lyrics come in, Trevor Horn is very well disguised by Chris Squire and Steve Howe. Again, they harmonize with John Anderson all the time. There's a bird flying over top of me. I hope it doesn't shit on me. It's flying very low. It's not a buzzard. I don't know. Okay, I got slightly distracted. Anyway, but those two guys harmonizing helped to disguise Trevor Horn's voice. And the first time I listened to this album, I knew it was one of the ones with a big lineup change, and I knew that two members had been replaced with the Buggles, but I was like, wait, which two members? Because it tricks your ear. It really does trick your ear with the vocals into thinking it might be John Anderson. If you were a Yes fan in 1980, but didn't really read all the magazines and the news and shit, you just listened to the music and saw them live, this might trip you up upon the first listen. You'd probably be like, wait, this sounds different, but I can't put my finger on it. What the hell? And then that's when you would look at the liner notes. But, yeah, the keys are not as extravagant as they tend to be, but that's to be expected. The guitar solos are epic, and the song, and close to the end of the song, Machine Messiah becomes Welcome to the Machine. I'm dead serious, the last, minute and a half sounds very, very similar to Welcome to the Machine. And then the ending guitar, fade out is fucking beautiful. So, very, very good intro for a Yes album. It's a good opener. The unfortunate part is the album kind of blew its load too quick. It is the best song on the album. Not to say that the rest of the album is bad. I think the rest of the album is very, very good. It's just not quite up there with a lot of the stuff that came before it. But yeah, they did kind of blow their load too early on this one. Song number 2, Man in a White Car, is 1 minute and 20 seconds long, and it's very clearly written by the Buggles. You'd have to listen to it to, when you would listen to it, I'm not going to elaborate, because because the song itself doesn't elaborate pretty much. Like, but if you were to listen to it, you'd go, yeah. And Trevor Horn's voice is very obvious on that one. Like, there's no harmonization. So, if Machine Messiah tripped you up, Man in a White Car, you would go, oh, yeah, no, that's not Jon Anderson. That's not the regular guy they have singing these songs. So, yeah. Song number 3, Does It Really Happen? It's got an awesome bass line and intro. It contains some tasteful new wave textures that are not, all over the place like a lot of prog bands started getting when the prog bands transferred over to pop. It's tasteful in the same way that the pop songs on Genesis's album Duke are tasteful, and Duke actually came out the same year as this. But they're very tasteful new wave textures. They're just a little bit in there. It evolves the sound of Yes just enough to where you can't go. It sounds pretty much the same as a lot of their other albums, because it does and it doesn't. It does have a unique identity. Obviously, when you lose 2 out of 5 members and replace them with 2 different dudes, obviously, yeah, it's gonna sound a little bit different. But yeah, Trevor Horn's voice is more noticeable on this one, but it's not a bad substitute for what they're doing on this album. It's not a bad substitute for Jon Anderson. I can't testify as to whether it sounded, like Jon Anderson live. What I should have done right before making this was looking up a performance of Roundabout from the tour for this album. To really compare, but he does pretty good. He does pretty all right. He's not a bad substitute for Jon Anderson. Jeff Downs really shines on this one. He really lets out his inner progginess, and it stops for a second, and then it fools you into thinking, oh, a new song is starting. No, it's just the outro for this song, and it's always kind of cool when albums do that. When songs do that. I kind of find that kind of cool. Obviously, it depends on the song, but I think that the video I make next week will elaborate on that. Next week's video is not going to be an album review. It's going to be a different topic, but it won't be the most surprising thing. I think you'll like it, but that's besides the point right now. But yeah, Does It Really Happen is a pretty good song. Again, nothing much to say, and that's kind of the problem with the second half of this album. Side 2 starts with Into the Lens. It's got a very intro. Trevor Horn's voice is front and center now, and that's the neat thing about this album. It does ease you into the fact that it is a new vocalist, which I think to most people is like the most immediate thing they notice, because obviously if the voice you're listening to is different, you're gonna, it's gonna, mess with you a little bit. And I think that's part of why Pink Floyd remained successful after Roger Waters left, but that's besides the point right now. It's kind of similar to the rest of the album. It's got a great guitar solo, and it's got some neat modulated vocals, but apart from that, it's alright. Into the Lens, I also call it I Am the Camera, because Trevor Horn just goes, I am a camera. Camera. It's interesting, and it's a good Yes song. It's just nothing, again, for Yes, it's nothing to write home about. Song number 5, Run Through the Light. Again, kind of sounds like the rest of the album, nothing super substantial. It's the second shortest song on the album, next to Man in a White Car. But it does have a guitar section that sounds like it's referencing Video Killed the Radio Star. There's a point where Steve Howe just goes, wow, now, and it kind of reminds me of the oh from Video Killed the Radio Star. And And then Tempest Fugit, great closer, but it just kind of feels like another Yes song, though. And that is kind of this album's biggest problem. You know, obviously Machine Messiah is great, and there's great moments on this album throughout. It's just, for the most part, musically, it does kind of sound like just another Yes album. You know, apart from, you know, the different members coming in, obviously. It's a much more Steve Howe focused album. Not that I don't like Steve Howe's guitar playing. I think he's fucking amazing, and he has his jizz-worthy moments. You know, he's very good. It's between him and Steve Hackett for taking second place to David Gilmour on the greatest guitar solos of all time list, in my opinion. But it's just like that's the album's biggest problem. You know, I really enjoy it when I'm listening to it, but apart from Machine Messiah, after I listen to this album, and my air conditioner just kicked back on, but apart from Machine Messiah, after I listen to this album, every time I finish it, I'm just kind of like, oh wait, how did that go again? Like, not that it's entirely unmemorable, it's just kind of okay. You know what I mean? It's a good album. It's a good album. Give it a listen. It's definitely on my buy list. But it's a good album. Like, definitely give it a listen. At the very least, listen to Machine Messiah. Now, following the tour for this album, Yes would disband for a period of 2 years, and then basically a completely different lineup would form in 1983 and release 90125. I think the only member that's the same between the two lineups is Chris Squire. But obviously John Anderson would rejoin. You know, like the weird thing is, most of the members had been on that lineup had already been Yes members. I think the only one who hadn't was Trevor Rabin, but that's a story for another review. But yeah, definitely give this album a listen. At the very least, listen to Machine Messiah. And that's gonna do it. Trevor Horn would not go on to... Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes would release one more Buggles album. But after that, Jeff Downes basically went on to be a member of several groups and had a couple of solo albums. And Trevor Horn, for the most part, has stayed in the producing chair. Jeff Downes would play with several, on a couple other Yes albums. I think in particular Keys to Ascension, those albums I think he would play on. And I do believe he is in the current lineup of the band that is officially touring under the name Yes. I know there's some contention with that, and that is technically not Yes because it doesn't have Chris Squire, obviously because he's dead, and it doesn't have John Anderson, but it has Steve Howe, but Steve Howe wasn't on the first couple albums, but he's on enough where I'm like, I kind of see why. But yeah, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. Thank you all very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like on it. If you have something to add, please feel free to do so in the comment section down below. If you want to hear me talk about something other than music, I have a podcast with two of my buddies. It's called Dorkies. I will leave a link to the most recent episode of that in the description down below. And if you want to hear what I happen to be listening to that day, or a 15-second segment at least, you can follow me on Instagram and which I will also link in the description. And with that, I would like to thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. And remember to stay weird and keep jamming.